Good morning, everyone. Paul Ruppel here with Fox 29 News. Now, bringing you the latest news stories at 10 a.m. each day after Good Day Philadelphia has ended. Want to get you started with a breaking news story that's coming to us nationally. Sad report this morning from Iowa, where officials believe the body of missing student Molly Tibbetts has been found. Investigators have recovered a body believed to be the 20-year-old's. She vanished from a small town 1 month ago. A spokesman for a reward fund says they believe they've recovered the body of Molly Tibbetts. This is obviously a sad development, and we'll keep giving you information as we get it in. But Greg Wiley of Crime Stoppers of Central Iowa said he learned of the discovery from a close family friend of Molly Tibbetts Tuesday morning. It might be Willie says he has no other details about the discovery, but called it a tough ending to the search for a University of Iowa student. The Division of Criminal Investigation in Iowa plans an afternoon news conference to update the public on the case. A spokesman for the agency has not returned a message seeking comment to the Associated Press. So it's been a long search there. I know we've brought you some news conferences here on Fox 29 News Now following this case. Again, body of missing Iowa student Molly Tibbetts believed found. We'll have more information as it becomes available. Here in our area, we've got a story that is developing this morning. Our Lauren Johnson's been out on this all morning. This is in Bucks County. The search is on for a man accused of groping girls at a Target in Warrington Township. Here is Lauren's report.
Hey, good morning, guys. That's right. So one investigation leads to the discovery of yet another one right here inside this Target store in Warrington Township. An incident happened last Thursday. So police got reports from a 15-year-old that she had been groped by an unidentified man. As investigators were looking over surveillance video to confirm her story, they discovered more. The same suspect was seen in the same store groping another young woman. And then they watched him leave the store, caught him on camera, so they saw him leave in this silver van. Not many windows, very identifiable. They were able to capture some still photos and get a look at the front and back of the van. Now they're asking the public for help. So if anyone was here last Thursday, if you recognize the man or you may have seen that van, you're asked to call Warrington Township Police, and they're going to look into this and find out maybe if there were any more incidents like this one.
That was Lauren Johnson reporting from Warrington Township on the groping suspect there. Police released his image and image of the van, and they're asking for the public's help if you might be able to help identify him. Elsewhere, police still haven't identified the suspect in a deadly police-involved shooting that occurred in North Philadelphia. It happened yesterday afternoon while a narcotics team was staking out a house on Cottage Street as part of a drug investigation. They spotted the suspect as he drove off. Officers said they surrounded him at a traffic light, and as they got out of their cars, the suspect tried to get away, hitting at least one officer. Here's a witness to what happened there.
And then it was like a cop trying to check for a pulse or something, and then like ambulance just started popping up everywhere.
The most important thing is to make sure that all the facts come out, that the investigation is exhaustive, not hasty, comprehensive, and we get the truth of the matter.
3 officers were hurt but are expected to be okay. The suspect was shot and killed by another officer on the scene. And a teen is in critical condition after getting shot in the chest late last night. He's the second boy in 2 days to become a victim of gun violence in Philadelphia. Last night, a 15-year-old was shot in the chest on the 5400 block of Cherry Street in West Philadelphia. He's in critical condition. Monday night, a 14-year-old was shot in the face while riding his bike on the 3100 block of North Park Avenue in North Philadelphia. He never regained consciousness.
From witnesses, this 15-year-old was with friends in the 5400 block of Cherry Street when one shot was fired, striking the 15-year-old in the chest. And we're told by witnesses that the shooter then ran away on foot. Now we're getting preliminary information that the shooter is known to the victim.
We have stepped up our patrols in dealing with curfews, especially like this time of year and the school's about to start. So there is a full increase to enforce the curfew regulations in the city of Philadelphia to try to keep these young people off the street at these unsavory hours.
According to the city's curfew, minors over 13 need to be home by 10:30 p.m. Sunday through Thursday. They need to be off the streets by Monday on Friday and Saturday. It's the latest development in the ongoing Russia probe that the president has been railing against. Fox's Doug Luzader has more this morning on what appears to be the emerging White House strategy to deal with special counsel Robert Mueller.
Yeah, a lot going on. The president spoke to Reuters news agency yesterday. This is where a lot of this news is coming from. Let's just say he's not inclined right now to sit down for an interview with Robert Mueller. It may still be possible for President Trump to submit to questioning by special counsel Robert Mueller, but it seems more and more unlikely. In an interview with Reuters, the president said, "Even if I'm telling the truth, that makes me a liar. That's no good."
How do we know what the truth is?
It was a point his attorney, former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, would later drive home after trying to clean up a comment he made over the weekend that, in his words, the truth isn't the truth. At issue is whether the president obstructed justice when talking to his then FBI director, James Comey, about his embattled former national security advisor, Michael Flynn.
You're talking about whether or not the president asked James Comey to go easy on Michael Flynn.
Because
and James Comey says he did, and the president says he didn't.
That's right. And they will possibly charge him with perjury should he give that answer.
And complicating matters, the fact that White House counsel Don McGahn has already spent hours answering questions from Mueller's team.
If Don McGahn's statements and all the testimony from all these other individuals conflicts with the president, that would be one more reason for him not to sit down, because that's a mountain of evidence against whatever the president recalls from those details. That's where perjury becomes a problem.
And look, that's a concern the president's legal team has long discussed, the idea of inadvertently, the president inadvertently perjuring himself, despite the fact the president has said a number of times that he would be happy to sit down and talk to Mueller. We'll see.
Again, that was Fox's Doug Luzader reporting from Washington on the latest from that story. Want to get you to another national story. Microsoft says it's uncovered new Russian hacking attempts targeting, let's show you this, targeting U.S. political groups ahead of the midterm elections. A hacking group tied to the Russian government reportedly created fake versions of 5 websites related to the public policy and the U.S. Senate. 2 conservative think tanks that have criticized the Russian government were targeted. There's no sign the hackers were successful in getting anyone to click on the fake websites. Microsoft has disabled the sites. Now, we want to take you live to, there is an event occurring right now in Washington, D.C. This is the Senate Foreign Relations Committee discussing U.S.-Russia relations at this moment. Now, again, that's the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and they're discussing U.S.-Russia relations, and let's listen in on this right now.
For that, why members on both sides are proposing new sanctions. In addition to urging the administration to use CATSA more aggressively, I think most of us agree Congress should also do more to increase pressure. Congress crafted tough Russia sanctions enacted last August by overwhelming majorities in both chambers. We should build on that. We should focus on the facts and broader strategic questions. What is Russia's government still doing in Syria and Ukraine? What active cyber attacks are they directing against our elections and critical infrastructure? What powerful economic, trade, financial, diplomatic, and political tools can we deploy now to deter those attacks? Russia's election interference, confirmed unanimously by U.S. intelligence earlier this year and reaffirmed again today, poses a problem that goes far beyond foreign policy and strikes at the core of our democracy. In no way is this a partisan issue. We're 77 days away from another election. The Director of National Intelligence, Microsoft, and others have been sounding the alarms that the warning lights are flashing red again. And while some efforts are being made to bolster state election security measures and otherwise contain these threats, it appears little is being done to address their source, Russia's government. I know my constituents are clear-eyed about these threats. The Ukrainian community in Ohio and around the world knows firsthand, like our NATO allies, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, the dangers of unchecked Russian aggression. That's why we should not only press to more aggressively implement current Russian sanctions, but also strengthen our response. New bipartisan sanction measures have been introduced. These hearings are a critical next step. Thank you for the three of you for joining us today. I'm interested to hear where we are, what effects, if any, the sanctions regime is having on Russia's economy and, more importantly, on its behavior, and your ideas on how we will more forcefully confront these threats in the months to come. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Today we will hear testimony from three administration officials who deal firsthand with confronting the Russia threat. We will first hear testimony from Ms. Sigal Mandelker, the Acting Deputy Secretary and current Undersecretary of Treasury for Terrorism and Financial Crimes, who is the country's chief sanctions architect. Next, we will hear from Mr. Christopher Krebs, the Undersecretary of Homeland Security at the National Protection and Programs Directorate, who is responsible for reducing and, if not eliminating, then recovering from threats to our nation's cyber and communications and other infrastructure. And finally, we will hear from Dr. Christopher Ford, the Assistant Secretary of State responsible for the Bureau of International Security and Nonproliferation at the State Department, who can provide us with some valuable insight on challenges with Russia. As you can see, members of the panel, we have a very good attendance, and a number of those who aren't here are at a different hearing on Russia in the Foreign Relations Committee. And because of that, I thank you, first of all, for your written testimony. It is extremely helpful to us. I ask you to honor and remember the 5-minute rule for your oral testimony so we can get through the questioning period from our senators. And I also remind our senators that we have a 5-minute rule. And we will try today to stick very closely to that. With that, Ms. Mandelker.
Thank you. Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Brown, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me here today to speak on behalf of the Treasury Department and provide an update on our comprehensive efforts to counter Russia's malign activity. Our efforts, taken together with our partners across the U.S. government and around the world, are guided by a clear understanding of the threat Russia poses to the United States and to our friends and allies. As this committee is well aware, Russia seeks to challenge the United States and its allies in a variety of ways. They are continuing their occupation of Crimea and ongoing aggression against Ukraine. They're attempting to subvert Western democracies, including our own, through election interference. They have used chemical weapons in an attempt to assassinate a British citizen and his daughter in the United Kingdom. They are perpetrating malicious cyber attacks, and they're facilitating sanctions evasion and other illicit activity across the globe. The breadth and brazenness of Russia's malign conduct demands a firm and vigorous response. Precisely for this reason, Treasury's Russia sanctions program is among our most active and impactful. Since January 2017, this administration has sanctioned 229 Russian-related individuals and entities for a broad range of activities, 212 of which were sanctioned by Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, including a number this morning. Indeed, we have issued Russia-related measures in 7 of the last 9 months in a number of different actions. In doing so, we have targeted a veritable who's who of Russia's most prominent companies. These include Russia's primary state-owned weapons trading company, one of the largest independent power companies in Russia, and a major Russian oil company. Our targets also include the heads of major state-owned banks and energy firms, such as VTB Bank and Gazprom, as well as some of Putin's closest associates. These figures include Putin affiliates Oleg Deripaska and Viktor Vekselberg, as well as Putin's son-in-law. Indeed, those who deal with such persons risk being targeted by our powerful secondary sanctions authorities under CATSA. Sanctioning these Russian individuals and entities have made them radioactive. We have made clear to the world that those who choose to continue to do business with them do so at their own peril. That CAATSA was passed by a near unanimous vote demonstrated great resolve by Congress to counter Russia's malign activity, and we share that resolve. As companies across the globe work to distance themselves from sanctioned Russian persons, our actions are imposing an unprecedented level of financial pressure on those supporting the Kremlin's malign agenda and on key sectors of the Russian economy, as the impacts of our Russia-related actions are felt far and wide. Indeed, Treasury's actions have extensively impacted...
Quick correction to what we told you earlier. This is the Senate Banking Committee holding hearing on Russian sanctions. Again, this is the Senate Banking Committee holding a hearing on Russia's sanctions, current effectiveness, and potential for next steps, with testimony from the Undersecretary of the Treasury, Deputy Secretary, and an Undersecretary from Homeland Security, and an Assistant Secretary of State. So we'll stay with this for a little bit and hear what's going on in this committee.
Cyber capabilities to the Russian intelligence services and covertly working on behalf of the Kremlin to interfere with the 2016 U.S. election. In addition to sanctions, we are also strategically and smartly deploying Treasury's other economic authorities to disrupt Russia's illicit financial conduct and harden the international financial system against its predation. And we regularly engage our foreign allies and partners, especially those in Europe, to coordinate these efforts and augment the impact of our sanctions and our other actions. By strategically leveraging all of our complementary authorities, we are increasing financial pressure on Russia to advance our national security priorities while simultaneously mitigating collateral impacts on the United States, our European allies, and the global economy. There is no question that we have imposed major costs on Russia. Yet the significance of our actions and our other financial measures must ultimately be measured in terms of their strategic impact. Though Russia's malign activities continue, its adventurism undoubtedly has been checked by the knowledge that we can bring even more economic pain to bear using our powerful range of authorities, and that we will not hesitate to do so if its conduct does not demonstrably and significantly change. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Krebs.
Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Brown, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Department of Homeland Security's ongoing efforts to mitigate cybersecurity risks to our nation's critical infrastructure. Safeguarding cyber and securing cyberspace is a core Homeland Security mission in an area that I have the honor to lead for DHS. Malicious cyber operations remain one of the most significant strategic threats to the United States, holding our national security, economic prosperity, the integrity of our democracy, and public health and safety at risk. Over the past several years, network defenders in both government and industry have seen the threat landscape grow more crowded, active, and dangerous. In fact, 2017 was one of the most costly and active in terms of global cybersecurity incidents, including the WannaCry ransomware incident attributed to North Korea and the NotPetya malware incident attributed to Russia. DHS and our interagency partners also worked with industry to identify and alert on Russian government efforts to infiltrate domestic energy infrastructure. But adversary actions did not begin or end in 2017. Russia's attempts to interfere in the 2016 U.S. presidential election are well and widely known, as are their activities to interfere in other elections in Western Europe. With the 2018 midterm just around the corner, we are working aggressively to support state and local efforts to secure elections. This partnership with election officials is representative of one of two core anchors of the U.S. deterrent strategy. Those two anchors are defense in depth to minimize or eliminate adversary success, and impose costs with strong consequences from malicious behavior. My partner agencies here at the hearing have equities in both denial and consequences, but my organization, the National Protection and Programs Directorate, is almost exclusively focused on defense through protection, of critical infrastructure. Our approach is one of collective defense, emphasizing the shared responsibility of cybersecurity across industry and government. We work through partnerships that identify stakeholder requirements, align unique capabilities to gaps, and add value and enable more effective security and risk management outcomes. We're focused on sharing information related to the threat and potential mitigation measures to improve defenses, leading integrated, coordinated industry and government planning to address systemic risk, and conducting incident response to limit harm and inform defensive measures. We manage these activities out of operational centers within NPPD, my organization, that prioritize collaboration across the full range of stakeholders, industry, or government. Our National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center, or NCIC, operates at the intersection of private sector, state and local governments, federal agencies, international partners, law enforcement, intelligence, and defense communities. The operational focus of the NCIC is near-term, day-to-day cybersecurity risk management, providing stakeholders with a 24/7 steady-state capability to address today's cybersecurity challenges. We also work with stakeholders to develop information sharing venues for affinity groups. Recently, working with election officials, we established the Election Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center, or EI-ISAC. All 50 states participate in what is the fastest growing ISAC. The recently announced National Risk Management Center provides a forum for government and industry collaboration on understanding risk and developing solutions for reducing cyber and other systemic risk to national and economic security. The operational focus of the National Risk Management Center is longer-term strategic risk, providing a cross-government and industry capability to address tomorrow's challenges. Through the NRMC, we will partner with innovative industry coalitions like the Financial Systemic Analysis and Resilience Center and the Council to Secure the Digital Ecosystem, aiming to break down sector-based silos to craft a more holistic understanding of national risk and the integrated strategies to drive down that risk. Our mission at DHS is to ensure that our stakeholders have the necessary tools and support to understand and act on risk. In the face of increasingly sophisticated threats, DHS is stepping up our efforts to defend the nation's critical infrastructure from malicious cyber activity. We're working to better evolve our protection of critical functions from nation-state and other malicious activities. And before I close, I'd like to thank Congress for the legislative progress thus far in strengthening DHS's cybersecurity and critical infrastructure authorities. Now we must move on to the next step, to create the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, at DHS, which would see our organization, the National Protection and Programs Directorate, renamed and established as a new agency, an operational agency. Establishing this agency would enhance DHS's ongoing efforts as the focal point for private sector and government stakeholders in support of our nation's cybersecurity. We strongly support this much-needed effort and urge quick action by the Senate to pass this into law. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee today.
Thank you. Mr. Ford.
Thank you, Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Brown, Senators. In light of the important role of this committee in particular, as you outlined, Mr. Chairman, in international sanctions, I thought I would try to contribute today by explaining a bit of how we are employing the tools that Congress has given us vis-a-vis Russia in order to push back against the various malign activities of the Putin regime. I will focus in particular upon Section 231 of CATSA because that has fallen to my bureau, the Bureau of International Security and Nonproliferation, to implement. In passing CATSA last year, Congress made very clear that its intention was to pressure Russia to change its behavior with respect to a very wide variety of malign acts, including in response to Putin's effort to interfere in our own presidential election in 2016. We have heard that message from Congress loud and clear. But I want to stress also that these sanctions tools have value in a broader arena of great power competition and geopolitical competitive strategy. This is an important theme for our administration. The new national security strategy calls out the contest for power as a central continuity in history, and it warns about challengers, specifically the revisionist powers of China and Russia, the rogue states of Iran and North Korea, and the transnational threat organizations that are, as it describes, actively competing against the United States and our allies and partners. Similarly, Mr. Chairman, The National Defense Strategy observes that the central challenge to U.S. prosperity and security today is the reemergence of long-term strategic competition. It is increasingly clear, the defense strategy says, that China and Russia want to shape a world consistent with their authoritarian model, gaining veto authority over other nations' economic, diplomatic, and security decisions. The National Defense Strategy notes that both revisionist powers and rogue regimes are competing with us across all dimensions of power. And this mindset, Mr. Chairman, is one that we bring to approaching CAATSA with respect to Russia. Russia has undertaken a campaign of malign activities in its attempt to compete with us, our allies, and our partners, and CAATSA 231 gives us more tools with which to respond. We're focusing in particular upon transactions with the Russian arms industry for multiple reasons. First of all, these are often the same arms that Russia itself uses and continues to use for aggression against Ukraine, for example. The world should shun transactions of that sort. Second, as Willie Sutton is reported to have said when asked why he robbed banks, that is where the money is. High-technology military equipment is one of the only competitive sectors of the Russian economy these days, and Moscow makes a good deal of money from selling arms abroad. These funds fuel the Kremlin's malign activities, spread its influence, and support Russia's development of newer and even more deadly weapons, and so we use sanctions tools to go after those revenues. But more broadly, Russia continues to use its arms transactions as a tool of geopolitical influence. For Russia, it isn't just about the money, but about the relationships that its arms trade creates. Scaling back and shutting down Russia's arms deals and deterring such transactions in the future strike directly at the Kremlin's malign activities and its influence, and that is the philosophy that we bring to implementing Section 231. Naturally, we seek to cooperate with Russia wherever we can on issues of shared interest because that is important to the security of the world. But where we need to push back, we do so, and we do so hard. And we've had real successes in using the availability of CAATSA sanctions and the threat of such penalties in deterring and dissuading transactions with the Russian arms business. There are billions of dollars in transactions that have not occurred and will not occur thanks to the tools that Congress has given us and our ability to use those to provide diplomatic leverage. That's billions of dollars that Putin's war machine will not get, and through which the Kremlin's malign influence will not spread, and a slew of relationships between the Kremlin and its would-be arms clients that will not occur or broaden or deepen. So we've not yet had, in fact, the opportunity, the need to actually impose CAATSA sanctions yet, in part because we are in the business of trying to make sure that those dogs do not, in fact, bark. We want these things to be conspicuous by their absence, and we are making good progress in dissuading and deterring transactions from occurring. We are not reluctant to do this, and if circumstances warrant, we will certainly be forthright and vigorous in applying the full breadth of the available penalties, but I want to stress how important our successes have been to date in making sure that billions of dollars of transactions do not occur. In my written remarks, which I would ask Mr. Chairman be submitted as part of the record, I outline a series of principles through which we approach implementation of Section 231. I'd be delighted to talk about any or all of those as the course of the hearing progresses, but let me simply conclude by making the point that we are applying these as a vigorous tool of competitive strategy to make sure that we do as much as we can with those tools to undermine Russia's ability and willingness to use its malign behavior as a way to accrue its own strategic advantage around the world. We are starting to have significant successes here, and I would be happy to talk about these and take any other questions that the committee would like as this time goes forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take you back to some business news here. You've been listening to the Senate Banking Committee holding a hearing on Russia sanctions. Let's get you a look at your local business outlook, or the morning business outlook. Here that is.
Good morning. Investors remain optimistic about a trade deal with China. The Dow up another 89 points yesterday, closing at its highest level since February 1st. Uber customers going to LaGuardia or JFK airports in New York City will be asked to select their airline. Drivers will then automatically be given the correct terminal and door information in hopes of avoiding any last-second navigation errors and giving flyers more accurate ETAs. Uber will eventually expand the feature to airports around the country and world. MacRumors is reporting that September 21st is the official launch date of the newest iPhones, with pre-sales starting on September 14th. That would suggest an announcement sometime earlier that week. This timeline falls in line with years past. That's business. For more, log on to foxbusiness.com. In New York, I'm Tracy Carrasco.
That's your morning business outlook. Let's take a look at the stock market. Right now, the market is up 80 points, just about 0.3%. The Dow Jones Industrial is up at 25,838. Looking at Fox Business News right now, they're saying that breaking are new sanctions targeting Russian shipping companies. They're also talking a bit about the stock market shaking off some negatives, but they're also talking about some positives that are coming out right now. Kohl's earnings, same-store sales, top estimates. Locally, Toll Brothers is lifting its revenue forecast as home sales and prices rise. Oil is edging up on tighter U.S. outlook and Iran sanctions. So several positive business outcomes right now that are being, perhaps contributing to the market being up. At this point, it's up 82 points. Earlier this morning, Philadelphia School District Superintendent William Hite joined the Good Day crew to talk a little bit about plans for back to school. We're less than a week away from the first day of school for the district. In the past, Philadelphia students started after Labor Day. District officials say there are lots of benefits to the new schedule. A major reason is that it guarantees students can get a full 5 days of school in during the first week. Here's Dr. William Hite on Good Day this morning.
My years of doing the news, one of our best years ever. Don't you agree, Superintendent? Because we haven't had any of the big problems, and we're back with local control.
We're back with local control. We are starting in August, and for the first time, all grades, including kindergarten, are starting at the same time. And so everyone is starting next Monday, and we're getting excited. We're asking people to be a part of the progress, and we are #RingTheBellPHL on August 27th.
Go ahead.
Why? I'm going to wait. Why do we have to go back so early? What's the point?
Well, it is a week early. It's a week, and one of the things, we wanted to do two things. We wanted to get more instructional time toward the beginning of the school year, closer to the beginning of the year, as opposed to in the end of the year when children start to move into the summer slide. And we wanted to have a full week of instruction before we start interrupted weeks with holidays.
Is he distracting you with his cell phone? No cell phones allowed in class.
Everything.
One of the things I'm also very excited about this year is that we haven't had a lot of the problems we've had in the past. We've got more funding than we've had in the past. I know Governor Wolf came and was touring our schools. What are we thinking as we're going into it this year?
We're able to continue making investments. We're modernizing more classrooms from pre-K to third grade this year. We're also focusing on our comprehensive schools, and we're addressing many of the environmental issues that were a part of some news reporting at the end of the year.
The asbestos problem that we've had.
The asbestos problem, the lead problem. As many people know, the majority of our buildings are over 70 years old, and so we have to do a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of investments in the capital work. But this summer, we went through, did a full and deep cleaning. We've released new standards.
Are we ready for this?
We are absolutely ready. We are absolutely ready for the students to return next Monday, and we're very excited about it.
Are the parents, they need to be concerned about what's in the air or anything? Do you think you got all the problems out?
No. So one of the things that we're doing is addressing all of those issues, and a lot of those issues are going to be addressed throughout the year based on the additional funding that came from the governor. And where we cannot address all of those problems throughout the summer, we're cordoning off those areas so that students don't come in contact with those areas, nor do staff members.
Teacher?
Yes?
I have a question for my classmate.
Yes.
You talked about it a little bit before about teacher training. Well, I mean, the teachers have degrees and stuff. What are you training them to do that they didn't already know?
Yeah, so they have degrees in the content areas or elementary education or high school education. But what we train them to do is actually be fully aware of the cultural and
challenges,
the cultural issues that our children experience each and every day. We train them to recognize trauma. We train them on the social and emotional aspects of learning. And we also train them how to teach reading, because although they come with a college degree, many colleges do not actually teach teachers how to teach reading.
Isn't
Michael?
that something?
Eugene, is there something in your mouth? Wait, can you plant it right here? He's always doing that. Do you have another question to redeem yourself?
Thank you. I think so.
No, that's about it. So we're ready to go.
We are ready to go.
And we don't have.
I'll meet you at Wendy's on Walnut, right?
In years past, we've had all these big umbrella issues. We've had problems in our schools with dealing with the violence. Do you have any concerns about that? I don't think we have a lot of that this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of things that we're excited about. One is we're excited about local control.
Yes.
And so now we started with a new school board. They're all here and in place. For the fourth year in a row, we actually have 0 persistently dangerous schools, and that's based on a set of factors from the state and the federal government. We are finishing the fourth year with a balanced budget, and while we're not completely out of the woods with respect to our financial picture long term, we're in a much better place than we've been in the past years, and we're seeing more children reading on grade level and more children graduating. In fact, our graduation numbers are the highest they've been in a decade.
How about that?
And so we are thrilled with the progress, and we're inviting individuals, as I said earlier, to join in the progress of the School District of Philadelphia while we #RingTheBell PHL on Monday, August 27th.
Superintendent A.
Oh, did you bring the apple in?
He brought the apple in. Thank you very
Oh, it's very
kindly. We
sweet.
appreciate that. Our wonderful Model A student. Mike, detention in my office.
How long have you been superintendent now?
This will be starting year 7 for me.
7?
Yes.
7?
Yeah. So I just finished year 6.
You ever think you'd be here 7 years?
No, I remember when we had a conversation here 6 years ago.
It was rough. You had some hard times.
I know.
So
I know.
I try not to remember that. I have some PST.
I'm glad you stayed.
PSTD
Thank you.
over that, but it is really important. Also, I'm inviting all individuals to ring whatever bell they have on Monday at 8 o'clock, and we're inviting everyone in the city of Philadelphia to ring a bell. It could be a school bell, it could be a bike bell, a bell sound on the telephone, a doorbell, but we want to get everyone involved.
We'll do it here on Good Day, right here at 8 o'clock. Put that on our calendar,
All right.
Sammy. All right, thank you. We appreciate
I'm going to go set off the fire alarm. Well, you said ring a bell. What?
Let's talk about, did you watch the VMAs last night?
I did not.
All right, well, we'll show it to you.
Again, our Good Day Philadelphia morning crew having a good time with Superintendent William Hite of the Philadelphia School District, talking about how they're ringing the bell a little earlier this year with going back to school before Labor Day for a full week. Let's get you some weather. Here is a look at Ultimate Doppler from the Fox 29 Weather Authority. You see some rain is moving into the area. Our call today is warm, sticky, and stormy. A warm front is bringing tropical air back into the area, and some downpours could lead to localized flash flooding. It's going to be partly sunny, then come the afternoon, showers and storms. So there's a look at radar. Let's get you a look at conditions outside our Fox 29 studio right now. We are up to 75 degrees. The dew point is 69. You can see that's a little higher than when we were with you yesterday. It was about 63, so definitely stickier than it has been on other days or coming into the week, and probably going to be warmer too. Winds out of the east at 8 miles per hour. So there's your live conditions. Let's get you current conditions from around the area as well. There you see 75 in Philadelphia, 68 in Doylestown, so it's a bit cooler up that way, even though the winds are calm. Wilmington 75, winds out of the southeast at 10 miles per hour, and Atlantic City is 78 with 11 mile per hour winds. There are some of your current temperatures. Missing a few on that graphic at the moment, but we'll show you the heat index is roughly the same, a little bit warmer down the shore right now. It's feeling like 80 degrees, 79 in Wildwood, 78 in Dover. Up in the Poconos, Mount Pocono still feels quite cool at 63. Here are your northeast temperatures in the 60s in parts of New England, 70s in the mid-Atlantic, 69 back in Pittsburgh. Nationally, you see the 80s down in Florida, 83 along the Gulf of Mexico there, 84 over to Houston. Still cool out near the Pacific, 58 in San Francisco, 67 in Portland. In Vegas and Phoenix, you're in the upper 80s already. But in mountainous region, Denver, 56 still. 53 in Rapid City due north of there. Satellite, not too many problems with cloud cover right now. Here's the visibility. And we do have cloud cover, it's just not affecting visibility too strongly right now at the moment.
Yeah.
Not much rain to speak of yesterday, and none so far in our area today. Here's a look at your temperature trend for the Philadelphia area. Should get to 78 soon, around 80 in the mid-afternoon, mid to late afternoon, and then drop back into the 70s before midnight as the evening comes on. Look at your Fox 29 Weather Authority 7-day forecast. Right now it is cloudy with PM storms today, 81. We're calling it a 7 on our weather by the numbers. Tomorrow looks a little better at an 8 because there's going to be gradual clearing with a high of 83. Sunny and pleasant, 79, a 10, perfect 10 on Thursday. Sunny and dry, 82, will go a few notches warmer on Friday. Saturday, looks like things stay nice, 83. And then on Sunday, we'll have some clouds. Monday, there will be a chance of a pop-up storm, 89, so we're getting back warmer. But might be a chance to open some windows if you had the air conditioning on for a while. It's cooled off the last couple days. It's going to stay, looks like overnight lows will be in the 60s, aside from tonight, into for the rest of the week. So more comfortable sleeping conditions. Going to take a look now at the live events that we were watching. Here is, it looks like that we now have the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee talking about U.S.-Russia relations. Let's send you there right now.
I saw Helsinki, in the private meetings in Helsinki, as filling into the narrative of Mr. Putin and his concept of how governments operate, and compromising our democratic system by the manner in which that meeting took place. And after the meeting, they were celebrating in Moscow, and they were scurrying in Washington to try to figure out how to handle some of the statements that were made. So, first, try to assure me that you say sanctions, you need discretion. I understand that. From the point of view of the executive branch of government, you need discretion for them to have a policy. But the problem is one person can exercise that discretion, the President of the United States. And we saw that the President might very well, we know that there's been discussions about Magnitsky sanctions and with Mr. Putin, etc. Have you been briefed as to what happened in Helsinki in regards to discussions on sanctions?
I have been briefed on the appropriate information I need to carry out my job with relation to Russia, but the President's also been clear, as recently as an interview yesterday, which I would direct you to, that this was the question that you're asking, when he was asked in the interview, he was very clear about this. And beyond that, I would say...
He's very clear not in Helsinki.
He was very clear with regard to raising with Vladimir Putin the unacceptability of interference in our elections. He's been very clear in his statements that he has not at any point raised the possibility of lifting
sanctions. He did that when he returned to Washington. He did not do that in Helsinki.
Sir, with all due respect, I'm not going to litigate the specifics of every comment that the President has made. I would point you towards our policies that are directed by the President of the United States. I disagree with your overall characterization that the President hasn't followed his policies. These are the President's policies. There's no distinction between the administration and the President. The President directed a Russia strategy, a strategy for countering Russian influence. The previous administration did not. I would point you to the 2010 national security strategy on Russia and compare it to our national security strategy as it relates to Russia. I would point you to what President Obama said in Moscow in 2009. He called Russia a mighty river and said that America wanted to ensure its rightful place among the great powers.
So I understand the policy right now. You're assuring this committee that Unless Russia changes its behavior, we will not only maintain all of our sanctions, you're looking for ways to strengthen those sanctions against Russia and are prepared to work with this committee to give you additional tools in order to make it clear that without tangible, specific results, these sanctions will be maintained and expanded.
Yes, and I think that's also clear from our actions of the past year and a half.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to make one interjection before turning to the next person. My observation would be that some of the undisciplined comments that the President makes creates just as much trouble for these people as they do for us and the rest of our country. Let me just give an example. The 232 tariff issue, which I believe is an abuse of the President's authority. Were y'all involved at all in discussing the use of a national security waiver to put tariffs in place, which in your case, Mr. Mitchell, hugely affects the portfolio that you are working on? Were you asked, or was the State Department asked about the use of...
There was an extensive interagency discussion and process on that matter, and both State Department and EUR had a voice in the process.
And did you support it?
With regard specifically to the European Union?
Yes.
What I supported was the President's trade policy overall. We informed that strategy. And I think as you see from the current U.S.-EU dynamic in trade, it's a strategy that's working.
I'll take a little more of my time. How is it working?
We currently have a conversation underway, a structured dialogue with the European Union about a lowering of EU barriers to American products and services.
Well, it's our understanding that the European Union actually asked to go to zero tariffs when they met with the President on automobiles, and he did not want to do that. He wanted to keep the 25% tariff in place on light trucks. So it's us that is pushing for tariffs.
The President has repeatedly and publicly, in the company of senior European leaders, pledged to go to 0-0 if the Europeans were willing to do this. The Europeans haven't been willing to even engage in a process until the President used 232.
So you support the use of a national security waiver to put tariffs in place on steel and aluminum?
I support the President's trade policy, sir.
And did the Department recommend the use of the 232 waiver?
I'm not going to get into the deliberative process. This is one administration. There's an interagency process for everything related to what you're asking about, and we're on the same page.
Senator Paul.
Thank you. You know, I think we've asked some important questions, and a really important question that we have to ask is, do sanctions change behavior? And so without the answer to that, I think we can't really decide whether we want more sanctions till we decide whether sanctions work. And that's another way of asking the question, do sanctions work? I think with regard to Iran, when the world had sanctions, there obviously is evidence that it worked to bring Iran to the negotiating table. In this case, there really is a question, do they work, and do more sanctions work even better? I think one possibility is that they don't work, and if they don't work, what is the result of sanctions? One result of sanctions might be that it drives Russia more into the sphere of China and drives a country such as Turkey more into the sphere of either Russia or China. And so I think there are arguments to be made that perhaps more sanctions aren't the way to go. Sanctions are sort of the stick, and the question is, what is the carrot? I would say that one of the carrots might be considering whether or not we continue to insist that Ukraine and Georgia be in NATO. I think that if you really wanted to influence Russia's behavior, and you were talking in a one-to-one basis with Russia, and you were to have some sort of agreement, I think an agreement not to have Ukraine and Georgia in NATO might lead to less conflict in both Ukraine and Georgia. There is the argument that much of the military conflict and fomenting of military conflict is because they do seriously fear and worry and are concerned and are opposed to having them in NATO. It was George Kennan who said in 1998 that if the West insists on pushing NATO into Eastern Europe and into the surrounding countries around Russia, that it will lead to the rise of militarism, nationalism, and ultimately an aggressive leader in Russia. And he said this in 1998, and I think, his words had great prescience in the sense that some of the things you see in the world are reactions to actions that we take. With that being said, if we are open to dialogue, as Mr. Mitchell said, in addition to both having the sanctions, the stick, but we still show an openness to dialogue, one of the things that I think we could and ought to consider is whether or not there's any element of the sanctions where we would be willing to negotiate lessening of sanctions in exchange for maybe a smaller change in behavior. If we wait for Russia to leave Crimea to lift any sanctions, we may well be waiting till the end of time. But perhaps there are some sanctions that already we could see that are counterproductive. And the ones that I would throw out are sanctions that prevent the travel of legislators in their Duma and their federation. And I think even in the midst of adding more sanctions, we ought to consider whether or not it's productive to dialogue, to not have dialogue. Even if you want to complain about election meddling, you would think that you'd want to meet with the Russian legislators to complain about election meddling. And I think if we cut off dialogue between the legislators in Russia and here, that I don't necessarily see that that's going to change their behavior, but it does block off the ability for us to have dialogue with Russia from their foreign relations to our foreign relations. And so I would just ask that the members of the committee at least think about it as the pushes towards more dialogue, is towards more sanctions, whether or not we ought to at least think about whether or not we want to prevent their legislators from traveling here, and then they do the same, basically, to our legislators. There are things that, despite our differences, though, that I think we should continue to talk about, and this is, I guess, the basis of my question. The New START treaty was completed in 2010, expires at the end of 2020. I guess I would ask Mr. Mitchell, where do we stand on discussions with Russia? Do we have ongoing discussions? Do we have negotiators? What is the status of the New START treaty and our discussions with Russia?
Thank you for that question, Senator. And if I could respond briefly to the first part of what you've said, I agree with you that sanctions are a tool of strategic statecraft. And right now the United States has 4,190 sanctions worldwide and 580 against the Russian Federation. What that points us towards is the need for sanctions to always be linked to a clear strategy. I think the role for Congress is to continue to be very specific, as you were in CATSA, about what change of behavior is needed in order for the sanctions to be lifted in any forthcoming legislation. With regard to New START, we've been very clear that Russia's violation of the INF Treaty has created a deficit of trust, and that extends across the arms control ecosystem in all of our conversations with the Russians. We're looking very carefully and closely at the question of the future of New START. I would just say at this point, any decision regarding a potential extension would be made at the appropriate time, and we would determine whether extending the treaty is in the national interest of the United States and our allies.
We don't have a formal dialogue on either INF or New START with actual negotiators, or do we?
Well, what we have at present is a line of sight to continuing the process on strategic stability talks, but we will only know more about that once National Security Advisor Bolton comes back from his meeting with Patrushev later this week.
Before turning to Senator Sheen, just to Senator Paul, I would make you aware and appreciate your perspective that we were in conversation with the former ambassador here from Russia about potentially reestablishing the parliamentary discussions. In lieu of waiving sanctions, what we had suggested was just meeting them in a neutral place, whether that be Israel or some other place. And so there were discussions of that type until the election issues began in 2016. So I did want you to know that those conversations had taken place in the past. There were no discussions that I remember of waiving sanctions, but certainly meeting in neutral territory to begin a dialogue. Whether that's something we want to discuss again, we can talk about that internally, but those have taken place in the past. Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for being here. And like other members of this committee, I applaud the policy positions that you've outlined today. I think the concern and confusion among Americans and the world actually has come because of the contradictory statements and actions of the President. because of his behavior in Helsinki, because of his frequent tweets, because of his failure to consistently acknowledge Russia's actions to influence the 2016 elections and their ongoing meddling in 2018. So I appreciate the opportunity to explore the policy positions that are underway, but I think until we see a change in that behavior, we're going to continue to see confusion and concern, and I'm not asking you to respond to that. That was a statement, not a question. Can you, Mr. Billingsley, tell me the status of the Skripal sanctions that were announced on August 8th? Have they actually been imposed?
Senator, the sanctions in response to the use of the nerve agent in the United Kingdom, those have been imposed. They were actually imposed under a State Department authority, and I would defer to Secretary Mitchell on that. We were in close consultation with the State Department in the run-up to that, and depending, as Secretary Mitchell has indicated, depending on how Russia reacts, there is a menu of additional follow-on options that range in potential severity, which we're in continuing close discussion on as well.
Secretary Mitchell, are we supporting Foreign Minister Hunt's call for the EU to impose greater sanctions against Russia in line with what the United States have done? And are we also working to try and encourage the EU to do that?
Yes, we are, Senator, very much so. We're in close consultation with our British counterparts at this point on an almost daily basis, and have been both with regard to the Skripal expulsions and next steps on sanctions. And I would just add, we were encouraged to see that the Europeans, partly because of U.S. engagement, created their own distinct chemical weapons-related sanctions authorities, which was a new and important step.
I agree. I think that's positive.
Senator, could I also offer on that? One of the things we've...
Only if it's new. You're using my time.
I'll revert back to you, Senator.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Secretary Mitchell, as we have discussed before, I had the opportunity to visit Syria and see the stabilization efforts that have taken place in northeast Syria along the Turkish border, and how much the Syrian people have benefited from that, from throwing ISIS out of that, and continue to be very troubled by the fact that the administration has on hold the stabilization funds for that part of Syria. How does continuing to deny efforts to support stabilization in that area fit with our Russia policy? Because doesn't that give Russia and Assad and Iran and Turkey for that matter, all the opportunity to go into that part of Syria, which has a chance now with continued stabilization and continued support to be a place where the Syrians can enjoy some level of freedom from violence and from Assad and his regime and from all the other actors in the region. So how does that make sense in terms of a policy for
Thank you for the
Syria
question.
and Russia?
I appreciate the question, and I would say nothing would be better from a Russian perspective than to see U.S. aid flowing in Syria in many different regards prior to a clear commitment to a political process at Geneva. This is part of the stock Russian approach to next steps on Syria, to see the United States essentially bankroll various forms of stabilization, reconstruction, before we see the Russians do their part in committing to a political process.
Well, I'm not talking about all of Syria. I'm talking about that part
I understand the
of
question,
northeast
but
Syria
you
that
asked
we have
how it was
actually
related
committed
to the overall
to.
Russia strategy.
How does allowing other foreign influence to go into that area and undermine everything we've done to stabilize the region post-ISIS, to work with the Syrian Democratic Forces, how does that benefit policy that says we would like to get people to the table? If anything, I think it would encourage the Russians to go to the table because they see what we've been able to do working with the Syrian people there.
Senator, what I would say is we take very seriously taxpayer resources as they relate to Syria problem in its entirety. We're cognizant of how that fits with the larger Russia strategy, and it's not clear to me that the actions that we're having are widening or creating a vacuum for other players.
You've been watching the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee discussing the United States' relationship with Russia at this time. We want to thank you very much for watching Fox 29 News Now. We're going to cut away right now, but we'll have more coverage of this and other issues on the Fox 29 News at 5, 6, 10, and 11 tonight. So thank you for watching, and have a great day.
Everybody's in place and Richard wants it.